Welcome, welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made my very own handmade sketchbook using a variety of different papers, such as this watercolour paper, some other types of watercolour paper and mixed media papers. So the first paper shown was the Stratford Expert, which is the most expensive watercolour paper I own. The second is canvas paper. I think that was very cheap. And then this one that I'm showing you now is mixed media paper. I think that was reasonably cheap, but it is quite thick. And then this one is the same brand, same type of paper, except it's black instead of white. This next one has lost its cover, but I've written on the back what it is. It's Canson XL watercolour paper, and that's 300 GSM. And then this final one I've had for years and years, but it's basically a mixed media paper. It just says paint on multi-techniques. But before we get stuck into making the sketchbook, here's the obligatory video of Rupert Bear, my fluffy, fluffy cat. I started by pulling 2 sheets of paper out of each type of pad and then writing on the corner of the paper what type it was so that I didn't forget later. I'm doing it this way so that I can try out all my different types of paper within a sketchbook and see which papers I like the best with which media. But you can of course just make a sketchbook using the same type of paper throughout. I decided to keep the ragged edges on these types. I wanted to fold these as neatly as I could, so what I'm doing is lining up the top right hand corner and then just slightly folding the top, and then I use my ruler to line up with those creases, and then I just gently push the paper against the ruler so that it folds as neatly as I can get it. Then I take the ruler out and use it like a bone folder to smooth down the paper and give it a really sharp crease. So now you can see me doing the same thing with all my other sheets of paper, but much faster because it's just the same thing over and over. To bind the papers together, you could use one of these long-ass staplers, which I was thinking about doing, but I found that when I opened my stapler, it was jammed, and then when I took the staples out, this spring thing came out, and I didn't know how to fix it, so I'll leave that for another day. But if you did want to do that, you could just use any old piece of card like this to use as a cover. Put your papers together, either all as one or in multiple signatures. I've got 2 signatures here, which is just 2 little booklets inside the cover, and then you would staple it together. Hopefully your staples would go through all of those papers, but I can't guarantee it. Instead of stapling, I'm going to bind my book by sewing it instead. But first, I'm going to create a cover for it. One that's big enough to cover all the pages, unlike the blue one. So I'm using this cardboard from some packaging, and all I'm going to do is just lay my book inside of it, find the crease, and decide where to cut. So I've cut it so that it's a little bit bigger than my book all the way around, and I can fit both of my signatures in there. And now I'm going to take some of these papers that I made previously to stick on the cover. So I did these by brayering acrylic paint onto packaging paper, just the brown stuff that you get in boxes. And I just got different colours and randomly brayed them on. But I think before I did that, I crumpled them up and then straightened them out again. So that gives them a bit more of a fabric sort of a feel. So I'm just having a look through the papers that I've got and choosing between them. And I've gone for this one. So I'm just going to lay my cover out onto it. Check that it's big enough, which it is. It needs to be a little bit bigger all the way around. And now I'm getting out my glue stick and I'm just gluing all over the page, ready to stick it onto the piece of cardboard. Next, I'm trimming it so that I've got about 1 centimetre all the way around, and I'm also cutting off all 4 of the corners because this will allow me to get a nice neat finish at the corners. Next, those edges need to be folded over and glued down with the glue stick. Now that the outside looks nice, it's time to make the inside look pretty too. So I'm choosing another one of my papers and I'm drawing around the cover, and then I'm just going to cut a little bit smaller than the pencil marks, which I've done here. So next it needs gluing on with the Pritt stick again. You might need a stronger glue than this if you're using a thicker material than I am, but for paper I find that a glue stick is perfect because you don't get any of the liquid glue seeping through the paper to the other side and creating wrinkles and things. Now I'm just smoothing it out, first with my hands and then with the ruler. At this point the doorbell rang and it was perfect timing because it was some more mixed media papers to include. These are Canson Graduate and I got them in tan and grey tones. I put my papers into 2 little booklets, or signatures as they're called, and positioned them where I wanted them inside the cover. At this point I'm going to show you the binding technique first because it's much easier to show you when I'm not trying to get through multiple pieces of paper as I will with my sketchbook. I started by making 5 little marks on the inside of the card, 1 in the middle and then 2 either side of that. Just eyeball it, you don't really need to measure unless you particularly want to. Next I'm taking a large eye needle and some ribbon, but you can use any needle or any kind of thread you like. And I started in the middle on the inside of the paper coming to the outside. I'm taking a little bit of masking tape and sticking down this end so that it doesn't go anywhere. And next I'm taking my needle and I'm moving 1 hole along. I can go either way. But whichever way I go, I have to keep going in that direction the next time. So I'm going up and I'm coming from the outside to the inside. Sometimes you have to wiggle the needle around to get it through. So I've pulled it through and then I've gone from the inside to the top hole. Well, it's now the bottom. I've flipped it around, pulled it tight again, and then go to the outside. And now I'm going the other way. So I'm coming from the outside to the inside. Then I'm going into the middle, using the same holes each time. Turn it over, and then continue in that direction. Being sure to pull it tight each time. And then this is the last hole. This is the outside. And we're going through that hole, and as you can see, the outside is now finished. So we don't need to do any more threading through at this point. So I've pulled my ribbon through and I don't need the needle anymore. I'm going to pull off the tape. And I'm just going to tie these 2 ends together, just an ordinary square knot, and then I'm giving it an extra knot just to make sure it stays in place. Then I just trim off those 2 ends, have them to the length you like, just don't go too short or it might come apart. And that is how you bind a book together, although ordinarily you'll do it with more than 1 piece of paper or card. It's also possible to use the same technique with 3 holes, which I'd recommend for a smaller book than this, but if you're doing a larger one, 5 holes is a bit more secure than 3. It took me a few moments to decide between these 2 different colours of ribbon. In the end, I decided the dark red, went slightly better. So just make sure that whatever thread or ribbon you're using, it's going to be strong enough to hold your book together. And of course, it has to be small enough to fit through the eye of whatever needle you're using. I'm using a large eye needle, which is intended for use with things like leather, which is why it has such large eyes and they're such big, thick needles. I really love these for lots of different projects. So I've pulled out about 1 metre or 1 yard of ribbon here, and that's plenty, more than you need in fact. I'm going to grab a pencil and I'm going to add those pencil marks that I showed you earlier, but this time I'm doing it on the outside. I will start in the middle and then do 2 marks either side of that, just eyeballing it. And the reason we're doing it on the outside first this time is so that we can line up those signatures and make the marks in the same place on both. Now I'm using the second signature to help me make marks on the inside as well in the same places. If you only have one signature, then you could just use a scrap piece of paper to help you do this. And then I'm making holes through each sheet at a time. Now I'm going to leave you with some of my music that I composed myself. So my book is almost finished, but there's one problem, and that's that it springs open. So I'm going to make some kind of closure. I could use elastic and a little button, but I couldn't find the buttons that I really wanted to use for this, so I thought I'd make a closure instead using this cardboard. So what I'm going to do is use these little dots of hook and loop stuff. We call it Velcro in the UK, but that's actually a brand name, and this is not Velcro. So I'm going to cover my little piece of cardboard with some more of this painted paper. So I'm just cutting it to size first, sticking down the cardboard onto the paper, and then I'm cutting off the corners just like I did with the cover. Next I'm getting my glue stick and sticking the paper down onto the card. And that's just to make it look pretty. Next, I'm using the ribbon and the needle again to sew the closure onto the back of the sketchbook. And I'm just doing this in a little cross shape. And then tying it off on the inside and trimming the ends. Now I'm sticking on that little dot of hook and loop stuff, and I'm sticking down the other side. I'll just hold it down for a little while to make sure it sticks on properly. So that is the finished sketchbook. I hope I've inspired you to make a sketchbook of your very own, and if so, please let me know down in the comments. Thanks for joining me in today's video. Please like and subscribe for more of this kind of thing. And now I'm going to leave you with some music while I show you the sketchbook from all angles.